We got a special treat today. We're having Jay Phillips of AuburnLive.com, part of the On3 network, on to talk a little SEC preview and let us hear his thoughts on Auburn basketball. Welcome to the podcast, Jay.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Anytime. So give the people a little bit of background on yourself, your background with Auburn. How long did you grow up following the team and kind of where that's led you to your role now?
Yeah, so I definitely grew up a big Auburn fan. My dad's family is from the area. My grandparents taught at the university and stuff like that. So I was born an Auburn fan and grew up loving basketball, played basketball from a young age. That was kind of my favorite sport and everything. Even growing up in the South, I just never stuck with baseball or football or anything like that. I was always in a gym. So it was natural that I was an Auburn basketball fan. And, I was 4 or 5 years old when they had the 1990, 2000, all that stuff. So that wasn't, that I was aware that Auburn was good at basketball then and stuff like that. But my real love of Auburn basketball started coming around the Marquise Daniels run. And it was hit and miss after that, but always stuck around with it. Grew up an Orlando Magic fan as well. I don't know why, but I got some good basketball in there as well, kind of helped cure some of the bad years with Auburn and stuff like that. So always grew up a big basketball fan, always watching basketball. And when Bruce got hired, I was, in college at the time and didn't really, I was in social media or like in sports media in my classes and stuff like that. And so I created this Auburn account to just tweet about basketball and, have fun and stuff. And it really took off. And it's just gone from there. I wrote for, Sky Underwood at Power of Dixieland and Fly War Eagle and Blake Lavelle at SEC Hoops. And now I'm over at On3 and we had the Bruce blog thing going as well. So it's just been something I've always stuck with and always loved covering the team, following the team. And
yeah,
what it is.
I remember hearing that on another podcast you were on, and I connected with a lot of that. I grew up in the South playing basketball, and my dad went to Auburn, so I was raised like that. And it's been an interesting journey. You're probably a little younger than me, but I think people who have been through all that just have this great appreciation for what we're getting to experience now. So talk about Bruce Pearl. I mean, you mentioned that as kind of a big turning point. Obviously it was for the whole program. We're so many years into this now through some adversity and through some success. Like, what makes him, in your mind, to me, like one of the best coaches in the conference, at least, and I think one of the more underrated coaches in America?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And he does so many things well too. He's a good team builder, a good talent evaluator, and just the staff as a whole. Bruce never talks about one thing he does without giving credit to someone else on the staff. And it does seem like it is a really good staff. They got guys who have developed players and guys who have been head coaches elsewhere and won at other places, whether it be high school or college level, whatever the case. But he has, he's built a really good staff. He's built a culture, and he's just obviously the master motivator thing always comes into play with Bruce Pearl and how important that was to get the students and the fan base involved, how important that is to recruit with. And there's just not much he doesn't do well. And, Bruce Pearl has said himself that he doesn't have the biggest basketball background in the world prior, before he started coaching. And even the things that you think that might affect, he had, all these innovative out of bounds plays and defensive sets and stuff at Tennessee that he used that were just, great. And some of them have been kind of outdated with the new officiating rules and stuff like that with pressing, but it's still one of those things, you get a baseline out of bounds play with Auburn and it's like, oh, that's 2 points. And he does it all, man.
And defending those,
I feel biased.
No, and we do too. I mean, we're huge Bruce Pearl guys, and it's easy to we always talk about how, well, if he was your guy, if he was, ask Tennessee fans, even now, most of the Tennessee fans I know, still huge fans of Bruce Pearl. Mm-hmm. It's getting a little testy now that Auburn's won so many in a row against them. But I think when he's your guy, it's a totally different perspective. And we talk a lot about how ridiculous some of the old stuff that's kind of clung to him, in terms of his national reputation and stuff and how he's looked at. I think you hit on a big point. He's not the traditional basketball guy. He didn't go through some of the traditional coaching circles. So I think that's interesting. So Auburn's 11-1. We've been bragging a lot on this team. We've had a lot of fun. We haven't had to cover a loss yet, technically, because we just did a podcast over the whole tournament. So we've had fun with this, kind of starting this up. But obviously, I think the SEC is super deep at the top. I think it's going to be a really awesome year. What are some of the potential problems or limitations you think this team might have based on what you've seen so far as the level of competition really ramps up?
That's hard to say because they really have played so well. Even in the loss, it was shot for shot, just looked like a couple of teams, a couple of really good teams going at each other kind of thing. And I do think, the big question that I had early on was outside shooting. Jabari Smith has been great there. Wendell Green has been great there. But once you start to play, like take LSU, for example, you're going to be playing a backcourt with Xavier Pinson and Eric Gaines and just a bunch of guards who have these ridiculous wingspans, and they're super athletic, super stubborn, physical guards. And I do wonder how Wendell Green, Zep Jasper, and KD Johnson are going to shoot against a team like that. And I think the other question I have right now, and I'm pretty confident that they're going to get that one going, is the shooting guard position. KD Johnson's been slumping lately. Zep Jasper isn't doing too much there offensively. He had a little spurt against SLU, but that's one of the things that I'd like to see them do, and just, have a consistent backcourt. I think the point guard position has gotten there. Wendell Green and Zep Jasper, what they're going to do every single game kind of thing for the most part. Sometimes they outperform expectations at this point, but it's, they both have an identity for the point guard position. KD Johnson, I thought, had the first one, but he has strayed away from that a little bit.
Yeah, we talk about KD all the time. We were like a KD fanboy podcast there for a few weeks, just because. And this kind of leads into my other question, and I don't want to steal your answer potentially, but is there something that has been the most positive surprise? Because with so many newcomers on this team, even Jabari, right? Jabari's an incredibly talented kid, but until you see it on the college level, you don't really know how that's going to show up. And KD was one of those for me. His defensive tenacity, the way he was just making so many impactful winning plays. Is there one or two things that has stood out in a really positive way that's helped Auburn get to this point?
I think Wendell Green is a big factor in that case. I thought, I really liked Wendell Green. I was tweeting about him before Auburn had even shown interest, saying that this would be a good player for Auburn to target just because he does so many of the things that guys like Sharif Cooper were taken away from the team. And so I'm a really big Wendell Green fan, but my thought was that he was going to need a season to really come into form. And I do still think that if he's here next year, which it seems a good chance that he will be, that he's going to be a all-conference type player just with that experience and, learning how to run Bruce's offense the way he wants it and kind of thing, all that kind of stuff. But his scoring has been a huge surprise to me. I thought that was going to be the area that he struggled in early on. And it seems like everything else, he hasn't had many huge struggles, especially recently, but scoring has been his strength. I thought he was just going to be too small, not in the weight room long enough, not just a bunch of factors that I didn't think, but that has been huge. And I think it spaces out the offense and makes everything better.
He definitely spaces out the offense. I mean,
oh yeah,
some of his shots from, I think Justin Ferguson sent out last night. I think he's 3 for 4 now in the season, over 31 feet,
yeah, that's crazy.
Wendell, the fact that he was starting and just so easily was willing to kind of yield that to KD. He's still playing just as many minutes as Zep and KD are, but his energy, his offense off the bench, which our whole bench is ridiculous, the amount of talent.
Oh, yeah.
But Wendell's been better than I thought. And I think the defensive, everybody talked about Zep Jasper's defense coming into the season. I was really impressed that Wendell and KD have kind of joined that. And I think bringing Flanagan in now, you've just got to, if they buy in defensively on the perimeter, which you kind of have to at their size, Flanagan's the only one that has that SEC height and length. I think that could go a long way. So shifting to the SEC, I think a lot of people have talked nationally. This might be, it's the first time in my life I remember people talking about the SEC potentially being the best basketball conference, which we know it's been ascending and getting better. People talking 6, 7, 8, 9 teams potentially getting in. I think this is a championship chasing Auburn team. I think that has kind of shown. It doesn't mean you're going to win it, but I think they're in the conversation. Who are the other teams that you think before the conference play begins that, you think will be there to the end?
I feel like Kentucky has a pretty good chance at that right now. They're just so talented. They got a good mixture of some of everything, good guards, good bigs. They got experience, not the greatest continuity, but that's something Cal has to overcome. Or, I don't think that's going to be something that pulls this team down out of the top 4 or anything like that. Alabama, it looked like, was going to be the team early on, but they've hit a bit of a slump. They're not the same defensive squad they were last year. And just I'm not quite sure if they don't have all those just keep subbing in guards that can go for 30 points kind of thing. That's just not who they are this year. So maybe they still have plenty of talent. They can get there, but I'm not sure if they're on the same level as Auburn, Kentucky right now. LSU is, deserves some attention there as well, but they haven't really played anyone. So, this game against Auburn is going to be their litmus test. And if they look good or beat Auburn somehow, then I think that you got to put them in that. But, Auburn, Kentucky, and Tennessee are looking like that group right now. Can't ever count Rick Barnes out either until you get to the postseason. But he's got them going. Kennedy Chandler's looking good in the backcourt. That's, that was what they really needed. So
other than staying healthy, I agree with you, by the way. I think that 5 team, it seems like that should be the 5. Of course, I really think it could be wide open. I think people are going to beat up on each other and get injuries. So assuming health, assuming things kind of keep going the way they are, if you had to pick a couple keys for Auburn to be in that race and potentially win the conference in the regular season, anything you're looking at there that you'll be kind of watching as the conference play starts?
Obviously seeing how fast Alan Flanagan can get back into things is going to be big for them. He hasn't been needed for Auburn to be a top 15 team so far, but if they really want to win the conference and beat, against Kentucky and Tennessee, I think he's going to be a big deal in that. If you can get him back to 100% playing like he was last year, it's probably your second best player, maybe, kind of thing. And that would be a huge boost to Auburn. Seeing if you can keep the guard play against the bigger physical SEC teams is going to be big as well. As long as, Wendell Green and Zep Jasper can do that. And they've both done it in spurts, but they've both never had to do it for a full season. And that's going to be, they're both smaller and,
Doesn't it feel like Jabari has he's only 12 games in and he's already been so impressive, but to me, it just feels like there's another level or two there with his, he wants to be playing on this team. I think everybody's raved about his mindset and as a one and done guy. Do you think, I think there's a level or two for him after going through 18 conference games as you get towards March, where he could really, he might be the key to getting some of those championships like Auburn wants this year.
Yeah, for sure. And I think he's just such a consistent. It's almost like I don't even talk about him sometimes just because of how good he is and how businesslike he is. He's going to come out there and do his job. And I've just been such a big fan of him, part of that mindset. He hasn't had to dominate the spotlight or anything. He doesn't care. He does, he might be playing UConn with all the scouts watching him, but he's going to pass up the rock if he's not shooting well. He's going to, he's just that kind of guy. If he's feeling it, he can score on you in isolation. But if he's struggling, he's not going to be someone who's pulling your team down or anything like that either. Just such a great player, such a smart guy, efficient. And I think that once you get into these games like the UConn game, and Jabari didn't play too well in that one, but you start to get in these back and forth games against other top 10 teams, that he's the type of player who can dominate a game like that just as easily as he dominates a game like UL Monroe. There's going to be Kentucky isn't going to have somebody who can just shut Jabari Smith down. Tennessee, all these teams he can go for 30 points and 10 rebounds against if he is feeling it and he has to, kind of thing. And that's something I'm definitely interested to watch just for the pure entertainment aspect, if nothing else.
Yeah, no, he's great. I think the announcer last night said something awesome. It's great to have a run stopper like that. When you get when there's an 8-0 run against you by the other team and they're playing really well and things aren't going your way. We talked last night on our episode about, him at 6'10", elevating from three or mid-range. There, like you said, there's not a deep. It doesn't mean it's always a great shot by our metrics of it's covered. There's a hand in his face, but for him, it's a pretty good shot anytime he wants it, and that's a great trump card to have.
I think a good example of that was that shot he took last night as well. It was his first make of the night when he came off like a little pick and pop type action with Wendell Green or Zep Jasper. I can't remember. I think it was Zep, and Jabari got the ball like right at the top of the 3-point line and did like the dribble step in move that he does, where he gets the defender to just take one step back, and that's all the room he needs. Pulls up for that, 6 inches more would have been a 3-pointer, that absolute end of the mid range, and drills it. And that shot is just like, it's almost, I don't know, like offensive to the point where he's not taking the three and he's like in the mid range, and there's just no way to defend him because he can blow right by you if you don't take that step back to make sure he doesn't. And
it's so fun to hear these announcers even who watch these games like night in and night out, because he'll do something and they just like audibly react because it's so different and it's so special. So he's a great player. I think he'll be, he's obviously an all SEC preseason pick. Who are some players around the league? We're not, until the conference play starts, we're not necessarily watching all these teams every night. We keep up with the scores and stuff. So, you mentioned some of the guards at LSU. What are maybe some position groups or some players around the league that Auburn fans need to kind of pay attention to as this thing gets going?
I think there's definitely some good bigs in the league this year, and that's something to pay attention to because it's one of Auburn's big strengths, and it'll be a big battle a bunch of nights. You look at Kentucky with Oscar Tshiebwe, and I don't remember how many rebounds he finished with last night. I don't have that in front of me, but he was out rebounding Western Kentucky, which has a 7'5" starting center, throughout most of the night by himself. And that is insane. This dude can get literally 20 to 30 rebounds in a game. And that's been a big, I've been talking about it a lot at On 3 that Auburn's rebounding has been something that you think would be this team's possibly best strength, and it has been one of their biggest weaknesses. They've really turned it around against Murray State last night, but I think I'm interested to see if Oscar Tshiebwe and, maybe even Colin Castleton at Florida, and I believe Tulu Smith is still at Mississippi State, and he was the leading rebounder in the conference last year. So there's a bunch of guys that are really good rebounders in the SEC that Auburn's going to have to deal with. And then you got Jalen Williams and Connor Vanover at Arkansas. Even Alabama, they haven't been consistently great, but Bediako had a really good game against Gonzaga. They got Noah Gurley, they got talent and size inside. So just how well, if Auburn can fix that rebounding, I think the front court will be their biggest strength, but there are a lot of front court battles coming Auburn's way this year.
Yeah, Jabari and Walker. So they have impressed me for their, slender-ish frame, how well they've stood up to attacks, to the basket. Obviously, Walker's done leading the conference in blocks, doing a great job there. But you're right. There's some physical, some grown man basketball coming their way from some big guys throughout the year. So, well, tell us a little bit as we wrap up. Let people know what kind of stuff you're doing at On 3. I'm a member. I think you do a great job. The team there, is really, I think, making some waves in the Auburn beat, kind of space right now. So talk a little bit about what you do for them on a consistent basis, and then also, plug your Twitter, Instagram, stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I really just do for them like basketball analysis. Justin Hokanson covers the team like day-to-day wise, and then I kind of share my thoughts on everything. So I'll do like a preview and a post-game analysis on every game. And I've been doing, like a breakdown for new recruits and stuff like that. And we'll start to step that up as well once some of these recruiting classes get a little bit cleaned up. Right now, it's just like, oh, yeah, well, I could spend like 6 hours breaking down this Targets game, but we have no idea where any of these guys are going. They're all flipping left and right kind of thing. We're going to do that. And then we're going to step that up a little bit, be breaking down, Chance Westry and Trey Donaldson's senior seasons a little bit, and just trying to provide a little bit of extra analysis for everything going on in Auburn hoops. And, you can find me on Twitter, and that's at AUBAWN. And then Instagram, I'm at the Bruce blog. And, I'm always around, always talking Auburn hoops.
Well, we appreciate that. We, we think there's a big need in that space. That's part of we do this after we talk after every game anyway. So we're like, why not just throw it up as a podcast? Yep. That's kind of how this started. And I'm glad people like you and certain sites are seeing how hungry the Auburn fan base is for this. And it's just really neat for both of us as alums to kind of see how that's progressing. So thanks for what you're doing to help beef that up. Jackson, you got any other comments or questions or anything?
Yeah, I follow the Bruce blog. I followed the Bruce blog for a while now on my personal account before we even started the jungle. So good job on that stuff. And
I remember we've had quite a few conversations.
Yeah, I'm glad you're on, man. I had no idea we were having the Bruce blog on. So follow Bruce blog on Instagram and us on the Instagram if you want some good basketball content. I had one last one now that I know you cover recruiting more. Me and Matt talked about this a little bit, is that there's almost a concept now with the transfer rules, NIL and everything. Like you can cover high school basketball, and that was the only thing to do, high school, maybe a JUCO or something like that. We watched a point guard in St. Louis last week just go off, and you kind of wonder yourself when you see a point guard that good at St. Louis, who's going to take them as a transfer next year. It's kind of sad, right? That you almost have to think about that during a game. Are you guys already starting to cover that kind of thing? Do you see coaches already start thinking like, man, screw getting these high school kids, we can go get Yuri Collins at St. Louis next year? Like, how does that even, like, is that evolving? Are you covering that, or are coaches even doing that?
I mean, I'm sure that, every year you hear about certain teams who, they're not tampering with these kids while they're still going to school. But I always think of Florida when they got Kerry Blackshear Jr. Everybody knew that was going to happen like 6 months before it happened while the guy was still playing at Virginia Tech. It was like, oh, well, next year's Florida team, it's only missing a big man. And then you got this kid from Gainesville playing at, Virginia Tech. He's not really a pro prospect, but he's a great college player, just a perfect fit for Mike White. And who knows what Florida did if they were talking, but it was like Florida fans were talking about this, and then they got the guy. So I'm sure that that's going to be way more prevalent now that the transfer portal is the way it is. Auburn fans joked about it when Wesley Cardette chose Samford over like Auburn and Alabama, that, hey, this is a guy who's just going to go play somewhere else and then come to Auburn next year or whatever. And I think we were joking about it on Twitter when Auburn was playing South Florida. They have Caleb Murphy, who's like one of the big name Atlanta guys recently. And he's, friends with a bunch of guys that Auburn has on their team, Georgia Tech as well. And it was like, Auburn's playing at South Florida. Is this going to be Caleb Murphy's tryout or something like that? And, people were joking around with it on Twitter just because that's how it is now. But I don't think that it's going to hurt high school recruiting or anything like that. But I think when you see one recruit who got a lot of questions on Auburn was London Johnson, who seemed like he was coming to Auburn for a couple of weeks. And then out of nowhere, it was like, oh, this kid's even going to reclassify and come to Auburn. And then it's like, nope, Auburn's not even on his list anymore. And so I do wonder if, there was something there that the two sides didn't agree or whatever. And Auburn was just like, we're not going to put in max amount of effort into getting these top 50 high school kids anymore when we can go get someone like Yuri Collins, who's going to be everything that he was and probably produce a little more in year one on top of that. But I think it's a bigger safety net, but I don't think it's going to change all that much except for backup options.
You wonder if the messaging's changing at all to some high school recruits. Like you saw Cardwell got taken on his team, but there was all this talk beforehand. Is he going to come on as a walk-on? Can we take him? We clearly want him. You wonder if there's any messaging that's going to go out to some of these guys that are borderline with us and saying, hey, go play at South Alabama for a year. Like, hey, we really want you. We don't have a spot this year. I think you could really use, like, if you end up going to UAB or you end up going somewhere else, I'm friends even with the coach at Troy or wherever, you go play under him for a year. I guarantee by next year, a spot opens up and you're on this. I wonder if that messaging is a thing or if that's still like a rude, like that's going to disrespect some high 3-star or something,
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it does. It's a better route than JUCO in a lot of the way. If your grades are good to go, why not go play at South Alabama instead of, Chipola kind of thing? And maybe you're so good at South Alabama that you don't even need to transfer to Auburn if you're really that confident in your game and you're gone after a year. It's not something we're really seeing now, but Ja Moran at Murray State only was there a couple of years. And, there's been other guys in the mid-major ranks who haven't taken, maybe, we'll see.
Yeah. Well, Jay, thanks for coming on. This was great. Hopefully we can have you on again sometime later in the season or something. And War
Yeah,
Eagle.
definitely. War Eagle, guys. Thank y'all for having me on.